Hi everyone, and welcome to our Canterbury Tech Lunchtime Tech Session for August. We're here with Dr. Claire Robinson and Tim Croft from Toi Mai Workforce Development Council, and they'll tell you more about themselves shortly and what they're here to chat about. Some quick updates from us at Canterbury Tech. Thanks very much to our sponsors, AWS and UC Business School, and UCE, I believe, as well is jumping on board. So we can't do what we do, and we can't get this sort of information out to our members without their help. And our supporting partners, Ridiculous Digital and Crescent, and Shorthouse Consulting. So that's in there. If everyone can let us know where they're coming from, it's always nice to know who's in Christchurch, who's a bit more international if you're out there traveling. So if you want to chuck that into chat and let us know how your mood's going, how are we feeling? Give Claire and Tim some support. Let them know what their audience is like for the day. Are we stoked about our -3 degrees start to the morning? That was a good time. I was on an early airport shuttle trip to drop someone off, so I bore the brunt of that. It was a bit rough. As always, we can't get through anything at the moment with Canterbury Tech without mentioning our Tech Summit coming up at the end of September. If you haven't got your tickets, there's less than 100 left. So if you're planning on coming, I would strongly advise getting that sorted. Every year we always have people coming in at the last minute and hoping for a ticket and they're not available. So don't be that person. I also need to mention, so we've got our 3 spaces. The Middleware Auditorium, it's going to have our major talks happening in it. The Crew Network and Interactive Room, it's got some really awesome talks planned for it and more of a discussion aspect to it. So really posing some questions and getting information from the crowd and sparking those conversations on top of networking. And then we've also got the CyberX Exhibition Hall, which is always a favourite of everyone to see what's out there and what's happening. We've also got some really cool community events coming up. The UX Meetup with Made Curious, as always. That's on the 5th of September. The AI Meetup is talking about agentic AI. So that's a bit of a newer one there as well. That's going to be hosted at Custom D. The FinTech Meetup with Pay It Now is really interesting about making payments via QR code. So what Pay It Now is up to with that. And then STEM in the City is basically the Air Force Museum is great if you've got kids, young people who are interested in technology. That's what that's all about, is inspiring them, getting them into that industry and seeing what is out there for them. We've also got the great New Zealand AI Roadshow coming into town. More set for people non-technical. So if you know anyone, if you have clients, customers, people that you know that this would be good for. So less technical, but more general business and a great way of how to implement AI to make your life better. We've also got our in-person, in real life, Embracing the Future, Innovating 125 Years of Meat Inspection with AI and Machine Vision with Matt Scott. I had a quick chat with him at our last in real life event, and yeah, the word carcass I have not used in conversation quite as much as I have with him. So I'm actually think that's going to be quite an interesting one to see. And now I will hand over to Tim and Claire and let them let you guys know what they're here for.
Well, thank you very much, Henry. Really nice to be here speaking to you all. Tim's going to try and work on the laptop to get the presentation up. We are, because we are paid for by the public purse, we're a Teams-based organisation, so we don't tend to use Zoom very much. But no. Having said that, we're not great Teams fans either, are we, Tim? No.
Sorry, I'm just going to move some things around so I can...
Okay, so my name is Claire Robinson. I'm the Chief Executive of the Toi Mai Workforce Development Council, and Tim is a Relationship Manager, which we call Matahere. Tim's also the project sponsor or lead of the Toi Whānui Enabling Technologies Workforce Development Plan that we just published a couple of months ago. So what we want to talk to you today about is a little bit about us, what we do for the technology industry, and then talk a bit about the government's vocational education and training reforms, which are happening at the moment, which will affect the technology industry. So we are in the process of trying to activate various parts of our many industries to say, look, if you don't do something about this, the government is going to make some choices that are not necessarily in the interests of the industries that Toi Mai covers and that you are effectively. So we are back in 2021, the last government set up 6 workforce development councils to cover the whole of the New Zealand industry base as part of their reform of vocational education to try and upskill parts of the economy that were needing better access to vocational training, better trained workforces, and in our case, in the technology, creative, cultural, and recreation industries, to bring us more into the vocational education system in order to be able to support workforces. Technology hadn't been part of any former industry training organisation attention, neither had the creative and cultural industries. Recreation and sport had been. But when the government put all the workforce development councils together, they clustered a few of us odds and sods together to create Toi Mai. So we cover the creative, cultural, recreation and technology industries. It was an odd pairing at the beginning, but actually there's huge amounts of things in common between the technology industry, the creative technology industry, the screen industry, the cultural industry, and the exercise, sport, recreation sector. Slight anomaly, but actually there's quite a lot in common in terms of gig-based working, project-based working, different business models. So there's a lot that our industries have in common. The other part was that we were all charged with looking after how do we get more of our underserved or priority communities into the workforces and more upskilled. So that was Māori Pacific, disabled, women in technology. How can we use training to encourage them to take up more opportunities in the industries? When it came to technology, because there's so much technology in the country, we went for Tim?
Yeah, so the way that we've divided out our sort of coverage area is that we look at the top 2 parts of the pyramid. So if you understand in terms of advanced digital skills, those are people who are trained, say, for example, as a software developer working for, say, a SaaS company, but then also, say, a software developer working for a bank would be in the second category of digital workers. But we also recognise that the tech sector is much larger than just people who have those advanced technology skills, but also includes people who use technology on a day-to-day basis in their work, but also those who have access to technology in its entirety. So technically, in terms of our training, our coverage area looks after about 46,000 workers in Aotearoa, but overall the tech sector directly employs about 120,000. It's also the 3rd largest, according to NZ Tech, the 3rd largest export sector for New Zealand, behind agriculture and tourism, and it's the fastest growing of those 3. It also contributes about $20 billion to the GDP every year. And growth on growth in terms of companies at the moment is about 5% per year. So it's a sector that is growing at a very larger pace than the rest of most sectors in New Zealand. But at the same time, what we have observed is that the amount of investment in terms of training is actually declining. Another thing that we looked at was, I'll go back to, sorry. We put out a workforce development plan at the end of June. And this kind of identified some of the issues within the sector. We went around talking to industry, looking at what industry wanted from training perspective and how to help bridge workforce shortages, but also what kinds of workers, what kinds of skills were needed, particularly going forward. So Infometrics projects that there will be another 10,000 advanced digital technology workers needed by the end of the decade. And so we've looked at how to sort of bridge that gap in terms of what we're seeing in terms of training. One of the things we've observed is that about 50% of the sector at the moment is on a visa of some kind, whether it's a permanent residency visa all the way through to a working holiday visa. And while we're very much so pro-immigration and wanting the sector to be able to bring in the outside workforce, we're also very mindful that the sector tends to is overly reliant on an international workforce, and we would like to boost the number of a domestic workforce coming in. And we are seeing areas of lack of productivity where we said about 25% of the sector is women, for example. We'd like to increase the number of women in the sector, and that includes in those advanced technology skills, as well as a number of Pacific and Māori, also be able to participate in the sector to bring the sector to be more representative of the general population. This report, by the way, is available on our website and has some actions and some recommendations to the Tertiary Education Commission in terms of overall funding, but the kinds of training we think is going to be needed to help grow the sector, to help make the sector thrive going into the future. We see a lot of upside for New Zealand. And just to give you kind of a piece of context around this, the average worker in the technology sector is paid a six-figure salary. That's about $50,000 more than the average New Zealand salary. So we see the overall benefits of people choosing technology as a career all the way through when they're starting to consider their training in terms of primary, intermediate and secondary, and to grow the sector instead of choosing the sort of legacy careers that people tend to choose. We'd like to see more people choosing technology to help grow not only the sector, but also grow the tax base that as we grow as a country and what we need going into the future.
So we don't provide training ourselves in the workforce development councils. We create new qualifications, national qualifications that all private providers under level 7 on the New Zealand qualification framework provide. And we also provide advice to the Tertiary Education Commission on what areas they should be investing their vocational education funding into. We are the voice of industry. We don't have an independent voice ourselves. We are simply the kind of the bit in the system that takes your voice, interprets it, and provides it to the government agencies. So we're really here to help you grow. The challenge now is that the government has this new government has decided that it wants to disestablish the Te Pūkenga network that the last government set up and return it to regional polytechs, which isn't bad in theory, maybe in cost, but not in theory, and to defund us. So we were funded to $65 million, but the government, National and Act in particular, said that they wanted to take all that money back to fund the tax reforms. But what that means is that nobody in that process of disestablishing Te Pūkenga and defunding us thought about what would happen to the work-based learning parts of Te Pūkenga. So that was the old industry training organisations that used to exist, were merged into Te Pūkenga, and now don't have a home if Te Pūkenga gets disestablished and regionalised. And nobody thought about what would happen to our functions, which we are legislated to provide. If you disestablish workforce development councils, who does our work? So the government is now consulting with industry on Te Pūkenga and also about what happens in this industry training, work-based learning space, so that it can try and work out whether you reinstate the old industry training organisations, whether you merge industry training organisations with workforce development councils, or whether to privatise work-based learning / industry training organisations and leave forms like workforce development councils, but not called workforce development councils, as independent standard setting bodies. So quite a lot of complicated issues in that. The challenge for us is that in the modelling that the government is consulting on, the creative, cultural, technology and recreation industries won't have any coverage under the options for the industry training boards, the old industry training organisations, and potentially no coverage under the new industry standard setting bodies, because to our great frustration, the government is modelling their solutions on who has and who hasn't got established apprenticeship schemes in their industries. Now, we've only been in existence for just over 2 years. We've heard that our industries, technology, the screen industry, parts of the creative industries, would all love to have some form of apprenticeship or internship scheme applied to their industries. But boy, does it take a long time for the wheels of government to move to be able to create these things. So we've started, but we're only really at the beginning phase of getting these things up and running. If decisions are made by the government based on only who has historically had apprenticeships, technology is no longer considered through by the government as warranting some form of industry training standard setting body. What that means is that they will take all our functions, Toi Mai functions, and give them to the New Zealand Qualifications Authority, nice organisation, but they will simply be creating qualifications. They won't be doing workforce development plans. They won't be talking to industry about what industry needs. They won't be advocating with other government agencies for the growth of the technology industry, for example, which are in our functions, but will go under the changes. So it's a bit of a serious situation, I think, for our industries, for technology, for creative industries, for the cultural industries in particular, because you all fought so hard to get a workforce development council to be able to support your training needs, and now it's at risk whether we stay in existence or not. Challenge now is that the government is in a 6-week consultation process on what happens to us all, and we are now almost we're 2.5 weeks in, so there's only 3.5 weeks to go. They have a whole lot of questions. They've got a proposal document. They've got all sorts of things that they want to engage on, but it's really hard trying to get people to actually engage and make submissions to say what it is that you want. There's a whole lot of things here. There's a number of documents in circulation which we can link you to. The officials in the Ministry of Education don't think that workforce development councils are the problem. So they are very supportive of our continued existence. But a few industries have lobbied the government quite hard to say, can we return to industry training organisations? And so the government is hearing two sides of the argument, and now they want to hear directly from industry. Don't want to hear from us particularly, but they do want to hear from industry about what it is that you want for organisations that represent your training needs, and what are the critical things that you need to enable your industries to grow. I'm not going to go into the various options. There's option A and option B, but if you'll see in the examples that they show for potential industry training organisations, they are the historic industries in New Zealand, from food and fibre to construction, through to the only industry with the part of Te Pūkenga as a workforce-based learning organisation, which is hair and beauty. So it feels insane to us that they wouldn't consider technology, but they would consider hair and beauty as needing to have some form of industry training body to look after their apprenticeship trainee needs.
Can I add one thing to that? So one of the things that we've identified is that when we've been speaking with industry is that there's been a need for there's a bit of a mismatch when people are being educated predominantly through a classroom-based system and then coming into the workforce, not really having and being work ready. And so we've identified the need for bridging of that. So whether that's through sort of a longer term form of internship, whether it's a digital apprenticeship, but some kind of meaningful workplace-based learning that could be part of the sector to help grow and attract potentially new kinds of people to the sector who, for various reasons, can't potentially attend university or need to earn as they learn. And there are other countries like Scotland, for example, similar population to New Zealand that send through about 3,000 apprentices through their digital technology sector every year. So we think that there are models around the world here, Scandinavia, even places like Australia, where if we can look at creating and using those kind of models and implementing those, that we actually can help grow the sector, but also grow a new training method that we could use in New Zealand. We're not saying, by the way, that universities are doing it wrong or that what's going on at ARTA, for example, is incorrect training. those are all really great institutions. It's just that there also potentially could be new ways of also looking at how we might attract and bring new people into the sector. So that's what we've heard when we've gone around talking to industry. And so that's what we've been messaging back to government and the Tertiary Education Commission. And we would like to develop, if we can, work-based learning for the digital technology sector as a new form of training here in New Zealand.
Yeah, and I think that the frustration that we feel is just that we haven't had enough time to get these things up and running. So don't go back to an old model just because they have established apprenticeships. We would like to be able to be in this situation where we support your needs by creating these alternative pathways for people to get in and through your sectors and training into them. So it's a frustrating time in that we were chugging along and doing great work, and now we've been a bit destabilized. But it's not just Toi Mai. I mean, we won't exist after June 2025. We're gone. But the question now is, what are we replaced with? What does the technology industry in particular want in that space? Because if you're not there, if you're not at the table, you're going to miss out on the resources that the traditional industries like the construction and agriculture sectors and hair and beauty receive in terms of government support, incentives, subsidies for training that your sector has been missing out on. So it's not the greatest timing. Everybody's in pain. Everybody's just trying to get on with their work, but it's about trying to, just start thinking about what is it that is missing from the technology industry that is needed in terms of ensuring that you have a pipeline of trained workers that are accessible to you with the right skills at the right time and the right place to enable the industry to grow. I'm not going to show those. So some people might be saying, what do we go for as options? From our perspective, we're a bit conflicted because we have hair and beauty as part of our coverage. We've also got sport and exercise and recreation, which may find that they have a place in the old ITO system. They had an ITO that may be resurrected. So parts of our industries might prefer option A. Technology, creative industries, cultural industries, you won't be recognised in option A. So it's about how do we set up a better option B. You don't have to make a decision about that, but I think if you are interested in making a submission, it would be really helpful to the Ministry of Education who are processing the submissions to really know what it is that you need from a government-funded training body that is going to support your industry training needs beyond what you're getting at the moment from the more formal education sector. And as I said, we're not going to exist beyond June 2025. We've done a huge amount of work. We've got 10 months of rapid work, which we'll be doing like the technology industry in 90-day sprints to make sure that we get the most out of our limited time left. And we're extremely proud to have represented the technology industry over the last couple of years. And disappointed that we can't see more work in this space, but hopefully something will still be retained from the beginning of 2026. We have no influence on what it's going to look like. Industry is the one that's going to be determining what is and what isn't in this space. So I'll stop there and we can have a conversation.
Shall I stop sharing, Henry?
Yep.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, thank you both very, very much for your time, and not to sound defeatist or catastrophizing, but it sounds, as you say, quite short-sighted. I think certainly as an organisation that has a large number of student members, people changing from different industries and wanting to get into technology, certainly more pathways has got to be better. I had a question, Tim, for you. You'd said early on that whilst growth in technology is obviously carrying on, as we're all probably quite aware, but investment in training is declining. Is there any any sort of reason for that? Is it just economic tough times, or do you have any more insight on that?
Well, it's so I think over the last decade, the training has funding for training has declined in real terms about 22 million. Part of that is just how the money has been allocated in terms of the training. So what we've also observed, I mean, I highly recommend you go and look at the Toi Whanui Workforce Development Plan, which has some great information about this. But we have seen that particularly in the regions, and including Canterbury until recently, there's been a year-on-year slow decline, and even before COVID, decline in the number of people training in the digital workforce sector. Even in places like Auckland, where it was sort of relatively flat. So part of that has been some of the reforms of training that have occurred in the past. Also, the Wananga stopped training at levels 1 and 3. But the big challenge, I think, we've certainly heard from schools in particular, is getting students excited and interested to choose a technology career at a about 13, 14. That's always a real challenge. And kids are still choosing a traditional pathway into things like law, accounting. And of course, we would all say you can do tech and law, and you can do tech and accounting as well. But those are historical kind of jobs that we see people traditionally going into. I think the other thing around that is that the schools, it's not inequitable access to digital technology training at schools. So some students are not being exposed in a very real way to meaningful digital technology training, so therefore aren't also choosing it. So that's partly why we see people choosing traditional careers, but also that's why the money goes in the IFS, the equivalent full-time student funding model. That's why that funding goes in that direction. But we have seen in terms of the numbers over the last decade have actually declined. And so, yeah, it's an interesting thing, and I think that's an area where we would like to see more people, obviously at high school and intermediate and high school, but obviously more people going into the tertiary level, choosing technology as a career. And we've definitely fed that information to TEC, who've heard us bang on about it over and over again.
Yeah, I think, and some of the other reasons will not be a surprise to you, that at school they think that they need to be good at maths to be able to go into technology. They don't realise that the technology industry has extraordinary numbers of other jobs that are required, and that's not promoted or marketed very well by anybody. The funding mechanism for polytechs has meant that, and universities has meant that you only get, there's incentives for them to only take in people who are going into long form qualifications, not short form qualifications. And so the large providers themselves aren't necessarily promoting these as career opportunities or as qualifications. And then you have just as Tim was saying, just the general sense that young people will go, and their parents who are advising them will advise them to go into jobs that are known, whereas technology jobs are mysterious and change all the time, and they can't see them. It's invisible. Everybody in the technology industry is working in a small office somewhere. You're not on a farm, you're not on a road gang, you're not riding a digger, it's just, these are invisible jobs. And so it's a huge lot of work that we have to do to be able to make these things visible, attractive, appealing, understood. It's going to take a few more years to be able to get into this space properly.
And the government has put in funding for Tech Step, for example, for the next 4 years. So that's an area where they're running events all around New Zealand, looking at how they can get people interested and excited about studying in a tech career. But that's just one part of it. It is quite a large mission to turn around how society views technology as a career choice anyway.
No, as in some of my other roles, I've got quite a number of younger people, high school and moving into tertiary education. And it is really interesting, the quite narrow sort of views that they often have of what they want to do or can do, or what they think they themselves can do. They don't particularly consider themselves especially academic, but they do have so many skills that I see would be so useful. in so many roles. But yeah, they feel very kind of, well, yeah, I'm either going to, yeah, like you say, those legacy sort of roles of whether it's nursing or moving into hospitality, or I'm good at sports, so I'm going straight into sports. But
Yeah.
actually, they would be incredible across those things. So very much a worthwhile in there. A question from Jeff, which probably is more than I can answer, is absolutely probably is worth a bit of a survey from Canterbury Tech to our members, and probably just in a sense of raising more awareness of this and actually getting people to submit, because if we don't do it now, it'll all change, and then we'll all look back in 5 years' time and be
And we
like,
missed that opportunity.
yeah, if only we had this happening.
And it's so difficult because it's not simple. I mean, these are really complicated questions and issues that they're asking, and so, you know, even I get turned off the consultation document because it's such a poorly worded, complex document. So it's really hard to try and encourage other people to get involved. But the implications are so serious.
Yeah.
Anna?
Yeah, Anna. Yeah, I just wanted to just chime in. I was used to, in a previous role, sit on the ARA local School of Computing local advisory committee. So obviously helping them to assess what qualifications and things were necessary for industry. It was really always interesting to me that they did have a pathway then when I was involved to take people from sort of basic computer skills, you know, your computing driving license, through to actually this could be something that I enjoy doing and I might like to make a career of it. And they always had a philosophy of building blocks so that you could step into something at quite a low level and then have that pathway forward up to a degree level qualification. Has that kind of disappeared? I've kind of been out of the loop on that for a good few years now, but I just wondered if that sort of thinking is still in place, or if the polytechs have kind of moved more to focusing on their degree level qualifications.
No, and I just want to say, like, I think you're really lucky in Canterbury. I'm actually from Oxford, so I'll say that. But like, you're really lucky because Canterbury Tech's an excellent peak body. It's probably the best peak body to deal with in terms of technology in New Zealand. And you're really lucky for it. You've got great providers. And so ARA do an excellent job in terms of taking young learners who are interested in technology from that, what we would call foundational level, all the way through into steps into potentially into a degree. Really, really good teaching staff there, do a great job. The big issue, of course, is the number of students who are choosing to study is the challenge. And so how do we grow the numbers that will want to go to ARA, want to go to the University of Canterbury, for example, and actually grow the workforce for the region? That's the challenge. Yeah. I think that's where we're sort of, as we were saying earlier, it's like really difficult to turn around a lot of society's thinking about digital technology. But yeah, ARA do a great job and pathwaying students through into the industry for sure.
But what we'd like to see is that sort of thing nationalized and normalized and
let's do it everywhere so that we can get more people involved. Absolutely. I think the other thing that ARA were quite good at when I was involved in them was actually that change of career path. And I know that, you know, personally, I worked with a few different people who had been through that kind of, you know, one was a landscape gardener and then became a software developer and then became a project manager, you know, so those kinds of career pathways. I think you talk about it being kind of invisible as an industry and the kinds of roles. I just wonder if, you know, part of what we need as an industry, and maybe it's something Canterbury Tech can help with, is to have more of those kind of stories that are presented to schools about, hey, here's this person that you might relate to, and, you know, here's how they got their start. And, you know, hopefully they tick some of those, you know, boxes in terms of being able to show different types of people in tech. But I think too, as an industry, as a woman in the industry, you know, you guys have got to step up and actually make it a welcoming place for people who don't look like you. You know, it's just a fact that I've encountered through my career at various times as a woman in the room. I'm the only woman in the room, and it can feel really isolating, especially when someone else repeats your suggestion and everyone says, hey, that's a great idea, but they ignored it when you said it the first time.
That's right. And it's even worse for Māori and Pacific. So we have, you know, 5% in Māori, 3% Pacific, and the number of women who are Māori and Pacific is even less. So it's a whole lot of issues. It's not just one thing. It's not just qualification. It is workplace culture. It's pathways. It's pipelines. It's finding how do you get mid-career people to say, actually, all I need to do is this, and then I'll get in. It's ensuring people understand the breadth of the work that is available. It's a very complex set of parts that it'd be good to be able to work more on, to be able to get it.
Yeah, we need more work on this, and it would be great to actually have that continue for sure.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Right. Well, I know that Claire, we've got to let you go and get back to a more riveting day of a board meeting and some birthday cake at least. So I hope that's the bright spark part of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks again so very much for doing this. And yes, it'll certainly be giving me some work to get out and about and make sure that Canterbury Tech members know that it's happening, because, yeah, as you say, it can all be a bit invisible and we can all just trudge along and do the same old, but we've got to get it out there.
Yeah, we really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, and if we're in the process of trying to work out whether people would like to have some form of prompt or script or whatever that might help people answer questions. I mean, I feel in two minds about it. I don't want to be the person that directs what your answers are, but at the same time, I recognise it's also difficult. So we're working on some templates now, which we'll send out to you, and that's entirely your choice whether you use them or you don't use them. But it's as a prompt, really, because I think that's the thing, that it's so annoyingly complex. But if our industries don't get in behind, that's the voice gone. That's the. But thank you.
And I suppose also to say that if the government don't hear from industry, then you won't. Then a decision will be made about you without your voice.
Without the voice.
So that's why it's really important to submit if you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much, though.
No worries. And yet we'll get all of those links and templates and things, and we can bundle them up. We'll obviously send them to everyone that was signed up for today, but we'll also get them out to the general membership as part of a recap with the video and everything. So, yep, awesome. They'll all get out there.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
No worries. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.